esteemed colleagues, scholars, and students. It's indeed a pleasure to be here at ISER Tirupati, briefing our efforts over the last few decades, parallelly in Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, and Coromandel Coast forests. Here I'm just briefing the baseline inventories of ecological studies in the Eastern Ghats and the way forward for ISER Tirupati. Most of the products are our own first generation and the next generation student communities here from Pondicherry University, be it here or IASA or A3. So that gives us a pleasure. There is a continuity of ecological research over a couple of decades. And I have a couple of suggestions before ISER Tirupati Research Unit. And particularly, I make this mention in this platform under the NAP. You'll have multidisciplinary research facilitated through various means and small projects. So with this briefing, I shall move on to the topic. Well, we have heard about the Eastern Ghats, the extent and the other details of 6 states it's covering, and I skip on those basic details. And it has been a great opportunity, various scholars conducting research, and I'm just taking the sample research that we have had in the southern Eastern Ghats region, covering 6 hill complexes, and over a period of about 15 years, we could have data generated on the ecological standing of the plant life forms in the Eastern Ghats forests, and many of these could now go to the global tree database and the global liana or the woody climber database too. So inventories, people do take up from the smaller to medium scale to larger spatial scale that would have the advantage of addressing various aspects of ecological research, and when monitored on a long-term basis has great advantage with respect to what is happening to the system and the extent of resource base that we have in the sample forest area. So that way, the global long-term ecological research programs spanning across the world, taking into account a hectare to as large as 52 hectare areas in many of the CTFS funded programs, forest geo programs. And standard protocol is being followed in many of the studies, but this is against to state with the ISER Tirupati that there is no compulsion on sticking on to under the name of standard protocol set in by CTFS alone like, and that was a lesson we could learn over the last 3 decades funded by 6 different Government of India funding agencies, that you should tune to your requirement and the nature of the study under the given academic framework, but essentially without compromising the core or focal research programs in mind. And it's better that some minimums are always met with, because comparing the comparable being a logic in science, it would help our study to what extent stands with respect to the scientific data generated over years from many other geographical locations. And standard methodology with respect to data synthesis and analysis. And all these will eventually help these institutions to be mapped on the regional and the global scale. The valuable scientific contributions that will go on for global synthesis. That was a simple effort ever since the first batch of MSc students took up, and those have first initial 6 years nothing could go, because 1996 only first computer to the university. Data storage started from then, but what has gone into is from 1992 onward, somehow with the hard copy that we had, all those data now could go to Global Tree Diversity Database and the LINA database too. So these would have the advantage of addressing many ecological questions, not only the number of trees, the number of species, and how are they distributed and how might their distribution affect forest folivores, frugivores, nectarivores, etc. And what are in particular the interconnections of floral faunal interactions. I shall be drawing little later your attention with respect to such interactions under the way forward lecture. So, depending on the specialist pollinators, dispersers, etc., and all these studies, if it is a permanent research plot with respect to climate change and other environmental drivers, and this would go a long way to generate valuable data. So, that way, emerging institutions like ICERS could contribute a lot over a period of time. The baseline research that has given us an idea of what is the extent of various plant life form diversity in various forests of the southern Eastern Ghats region, the large-scale 60-hectare all-India coordinated DBT funded program. 6 institutions, 6 blocks of Eastern Ghats forests, including SK University, Professor Pillaya's student, Dr. Ravi Prasad Rao, and the southernmost region for Pondicherry University, gave us the opportunity to explore at the larger spatial scale tree diversity, line diversity, and the resource value of those species under the various ecological setting with respect to impacts, bioinvasions, and human impacts, mining, plantations, roads, dams, etc. And these have give an idea about the extent of diversity we have and also the operative drivers. Well, the other important point with respect to scholars and researchers is to have their data and analyzed it thoroughly and encouraging them to publish, then only the scientific community gets to know about. This is phase 1 of it. Then the next comes to the mind that what is the resource base? The abundance data will be of great value, and it's a question of the long list of rare species that contributes to total biodiversity in a given geographical area and besides the dominant species. So such databases would help for next follow-up studies. I skip the pictures or images of many of these species which are valuable in their own way. So way back in the early 90s, when we initiated this program in the Collie Hills of Eastern Ghats, and that is the time in the early 90s, large-scale ecology was picking up. Ever since Campbell's book from Grinnell came out on titled Large Scale Ecology, and we have been on the contemporary mode of generating data at a fairly large scale. And what happens to that over a period of time by setting up permanent research, ecological research plots, the so-called LTERs in the 4 shola forests of the Eastern Ghats of India, and that has gone to the publication in biodiversity and conservation for one of the PhD scholars program. That is monitored by our MSc student after 3 years, getting back to the same site to detect forest growth, recruitment and mortality and carbon stock changes. Bharat is now with Nalanda University, and these are the advantage of permanent research plots. And one of the suggestions to ICERS will be that in couple of years, data generated that will give valuable information on what happens with the time to the system. So the Sherwarayan Hills ever since initiated work in 1992 for the other PhD scholars program, and that has gone to again biodiversity and conservation for publication. These were some of the baseline studies from the 90s that we could initiate and later on extended to the entire southern Eastern Ghats. There are pockets of Eastern Ghats in the Kalrayan Hills imitating the Western Ghats in terms of their floristic diversity, and these sites are in danger because of the extent of anthropogenic pressure that are operating. And also between the Eastern and Western Ghats, up Dindigul town, we have the Sirumalai Hills, which is listed as Eastern Ghats sector, and there are a lot of pressures with respect to such sites, and these are some of the live examples of how sites are being deteriorating. And when we were with MSc batch of students, and there have been teams of students taking up research different aspects. And this is from the Kalrayan Hills of the Eastern Ghats on the structural aspects of the forest. The large-scale inventory of the 60-hectare plot formed one of the major breakthroughs in the All India Coordinated DBT-funded projects. And for us, the Southern Eastern Ghats region, and from Odisha, Dr. P.C. Panda's work to Southern Eastern Ghats work through SKU works from Dr. Palaya's generations of research students. So that was published in Flora, and these gave us an idea at the larger spatial scale. When inventories are conducted, still we get to have long list of species in low abundance, as low as just 1 or 2 individuals, and they form the bulk of the biodiversity. This is at the landscape level approach. I don't go to the details of it, but in the 60-hectare scale, 272 species and 27,000 individuals of tree species of 30 centimeter and above girth class, and how the species area curve, the estimator above and the actual realistic below. And in fortunately, couple of cases, it has neared asymptote, but not so in many others, attesting the fact that there are still more species one could expect. Unlike the species area curves that we see in the T.C. Whitmore's book, ever increasing at the fairly larger scale, they tend to stabilize. The inner details of the work. Then, when I compared the 76 years of tree diversity at the comparable scale of just 1 hectare, where does Eastern Ghats stand with respect to a hectare of plant diversity? At a hectare of 1 hectare scale, the biodiversity assessment. No, I'm not moving correctly. Back to the. Can you go back? No, you are moving forward. Back. At the 1 hectare scale, Central and South American forests, 300 species, most of the Amazon centered forests. Back. Let me try, maybe. This is forward, this is backward. Am I correct? Ah. So at the 1 hectare scale, most of the tropical American, 1 hectare only tree diversity, adult species, 30 centimeter and above girth class. South and Southeast Asian forests, about 200. Northeast Indian Andamans, 100 species of trees per hectare. Western Ghats about 30 to 80, but 85 is maximum. Eastern Ghats about half of the Western Ghats, and in East Coast forest, tropical dry evergreen forest about 20 to 30 species, average being about 25 or so. When diversity is moderately high in one life form, proportional diversity we could expect in other life forms too, to make use of the resources provided by the basic structural framework providing plant community. So this needs to be kept in mind when diversity studies are planned, and this gives us an idea what is the extent of diversity across global forests at the comparable 1 hectare scale, and where does Eastern Ghats stand. There is an opportunity for the global tree researchers for the first time to pool the data for the cause of global synthesis, and that was from 2011 to 815, and by 15th June we have the estimate of the whole of the tropics, 40 to 53,000 species. Then from the next 4 years time frame, last month the publication, entire globe, what is the number of tree species? 73,000. The global tree diversity contributors over several decades of the data generated. The next third paper in PNAS published last month on the extent of tree diversity. As of now, the estimate is 73,000 species. That way, quality work never gets unattended. So that is the quality works always will have their own standing. This gives us an idea what is the nature or extent of a level of endemism, how much are confined to the continental level. This gives the same will be applicable to the various sectors of the Eastern Ghats or Western Ghats too. The importance of regional level of biodiversity, and globally just 0.1% common, and at the continental scale, the extent of endemism, that being the very nature of the pattern of global biodiversity, that gives us an idea of nature of partitioning across the continents and how much of importance needs to be given in terms of conserving regional level diversity. That's one part of it. The long-term plots have great advantage, be it forest geo efforts, the LTEO of Indian efforts, and various programs over the 3 decades time frame with our department. The core results were compiled in 2015 and analyzed that commonly gave the lesson that rates of tree mortality increasing in world's forests due to various environmental drivers. CO2 level increased by 16% in BCA Panama plot, 0.6 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, 30% change in the precipitation level, and landscape around the forest experienced deforestation, as it has been happening in many locations of the globe. For the last 2 decades or more, large trees all over the world have been dying, reported ever since from 2012. And at the same time, nature took care of in increasing the abundance of the woody climbers or the lianas, almost at the same proportion as a natural compensation to CO2 level increase. As you see, liana clothed tree canopies in the East Coast forests. And Indian forests are the 3rd largest in terms of lion abundance, next only to the first Bolivian forest, 2nd African forest. Nearing 3rd is the Malaysian forest, and India is the 4th largest in terms of lion abundance. And as of now, we have 4 source books on lianas ever since Charles Darwin's first book, then Putz and Mooney's Biology of Vines. Then we have 4 chapters in the book Ecology of Lianas, following our lianologists meet in University of California for a week in this 32-chaptered book. And then our own book with 13 chapters. These 4 books give us the state of art of liana biodiversity ecology and the importance of conservation under the context of climate change. When trees are dying, how much of compensation of lianas can make when trees are dying. The largest scale liana inventory from the southern Eastern Ghats region, 175 species, of which 143 species are with resource values in terms of ecological or economic potential. The extent of leaf foliage lianas are capable of rewarding to the forest folivores and the fruit crop to the frugivores. Like you see Diploclisia glassescens in the Collie Hills of the Eastern Ghats, how much of vertebrate faunal communities are supported. Nothing is a waste in forest, including the invasive species, because the resources as ecologically or economically utilized by various communities. But the check is in terms of invasion, how much they are taxing on the natural biodiversity. So the climbing plants, various species of them, and lantana has been an obnoxious plant in various forests of the Eastern Ghats, taxing on the native biodiversity. And for the genus Jasminum too, one of the important bioregions. And this is how our students learn in the field in the forests of the Eastern Ghats. And they have exposure to the Western Ghats in the initial few batches, then Eastern Ghats, now on the Coromandel coast forests. So, how much resource potential? In a phased manner, only such studies can be conducted by teams of people. And this is one effort on 175 liana species, how much they are distributed, abundance patterns of them, how much are resourceful to forest folivores and frugivores, and of economically valuable species. Just half a centimeter diameter liana, look at the extent of a leaf canopy they can produce, a dioecious liana, male and female. So Pyrenacantha volubilis, and the fruits UAS Bangalore plant physiology team and genetics team. Anti-cancer drug camptothecin will be ready soon. They are in the final stage. Where this species is distributed from our publications, they collected the species and have been working on this for the last 5 years. Pyrenacantha volubilis. Understory diversity is equally high, but there are not many compiled works on these aspects. This is one of the gaps we have on trees, we have on lianas, but not much on the understory species compilation, because they are one of the sensitive components that could be kept as important candidates under climate change scenario. 1/3 of the world's landscape is modified for various purposes. Massive degradation is progressive. We need resources. Various biota in the wild need resources. We obtain from all the biomes. And at the same time, we are making use of the forest lands for growing various plantation crops of coffee, tea, pepper, and various other purposes, including plantations in various forests of the Eastern Ghats, and mining for bauxite mining in the Eastern Ghats area. Under such scenario, where does we stand? This is an example of a paper in environmental science and policy with respect to the changes that are being happening due to various developmental activities in the core forest areas. And that was a concern we expressed in our first paper in Nature. And the baseline data has given us an idea over the last 3 decades in terms of what is the extent of biodiversity we have with respect to plant groups. And now, a couple of suggestions based on these baseline studies to growing institutions like ICER, what I have been incubating in mind, and we could come up with that in the tropical dry evergreen forest of on the Eastern Ghats, bringing out the book of our 25 years of work on the east coast of India, But when it comes to the patchy Eastern Ghats, the compilation can be made on par with, like we have Introduction to Tropical Rainforest by T.C. Whitmore. So we have been referring for ecological studies in many of the Western world books. And that has been the practice for many years. IISER, here E is there or is there. So, and under NEP, there are a lot of possibilities. These are few suggestions that came to my mind from the baseline research. Now it's time to have a fairly long-term programs of initially 3 to 10 years, ideally 20 years. By the time Nandini Rabin et al. Retire. So those compilations can come attesting the ecological research over a long term conducted. So about a 3 to 10 year plan can be kept in mind. Have in couple of in each forest type representative fairly landscape level large scale study plots. For adult tree species and for regeneration study, you can cut down the threshold of trees and lianas, number one. And address issues like biodiversity, initial inventory, it may planning for 1 year and then execution for next 3 to 5 or 6 year program, number one. Number two, it can be for various angles of ecological studies, biodiversity changes and the carbon sequestration potential in relation to climate change and other drivers, including the effects of mining and resource extraction level, etc. Then this is something that eco restoration decade, and you can try to tap funding in selecting some of the mined areas for long-term studies, how species can come up and what kind of species can be promoted as a community level approach for promoting biodiversity. The second, and also this is one such approach, there are monitoring work, University of Edinburgh funds, SECO project, and 1 hour 50 minutes funding given. 1 hour 50 minutes. They have been mailing for about 3 months or so, ever since we met in Zurich, the dry forest group, and everything set. I told directly it can be reimbursed to students. They said we can be made for them. And I have everything readied and then scanned and mailed to them. 1 hour and 15 minutes, the reply came. And that was something remarkable. And these kind of supports, University of Edinburgh, Scotland, SECO project will be operative till 2024. So that could be tapped for such small efforts of students. BSc projects, MSc projects, short-term supports of intermediate time for the research scholars. Second important thing is community level studies on phenology with the structural aspects studied, different communities and strata, how they are effectively utilized by faunal communities as separate projects, phenological observations for 3 years or so, 1 to 3 years or so, pollination systems and seed dispersal systems. We need not have to take 10 years like the Malaysian forest Japanese team study, but at least for 3 years of PhD programs by 2 or 3 group on one on pollination and other seed dispersal systems. And that way, through that, behavioral ecology of a couple of species, etc., could be covered in that. Comparing across forest types as part of in-depth forest functional ecology study in better understanding plant-animal interactions, to analyze the complex web of species interactions. Such studies are very limited because we have separate botany zoology departments and our expertise are different. So this is an opportunity under this new national education policy. We can have certain projects and have ready in your box, basket of projects, small projects. When they approach ready-made, you will have something to suggest, saving a lot of time in the process and generating valuable data. Then intensive studies on the species biology of or population study of resourceful species like red sanders we have been talking about, n number of species, both plant and animal side, and how far they are ecologically and economically valuable, and what is the extent of resource extraction that are aimed, and to what extent through self-help groups and other means and modes, the science society interface can be taken care in this exercise. And this part of it, as Professor Dr. Mathur was mentioning about, so it's important that parallelly we have a couple of teams working on specially defined focal programs so that over a period of time, we have a better understanding of a couple of forest systems and biotic groups. So this is the briefing that I wanted to make. I wanted to confine before 4 o'clock. So since you are running short of time, if there are any queries or clarifications, either today or on the second during the field trip in person, students are welcome to interact. And the other important message to the ecological community is that we need really valuable quality data to be generated, and over a period of time when generated, it will be very valuable to science. India needs it. Indian manpower is very, very potential in terms of, but they need good trigger and encouragement. So this is what I sincerely hope that ICERs would provide for the betterment of the institution's growth. My best wishes to the team of researchers in this venture. Good luck to all. Any questions or clarifications, I'll be happy to respond to.
Thank you, sir.
Scholars, my specific submission is please develop skill parallelly in terms of field work, in terms of species recognition skill, which has been diminishing, and in terms of your core ability to analyze data, and last, very important, scientific communication. Scientific communication, writing up into papers, publishing it, and then distilling that and providing to the end users of forest department and other stakeholders distilled from your research for the societal benefit. This is where we need to better understand biodiversity science and conservation sciences stemming from basic biological and ecological knowledge. So